So, I don't know why, but recently I've seen a whole lot of highlights of various cricket competitions on my YouTube feed. I really don't know a whole lot about cricket, but there's this guy, Jomboy. I'll link to his channel. He's awesome. He's been including cricket in his coverage, which I think is a ton of fun. Uh, and of course, me thinking about things from all the crazy, weird perspectives that I do. I looked, learned how the different formats of cricket work and whatnot. And I had an idea for what I thought might be a fun alternate format. Again, I'm not super into cricket, so this is some guy who doesn't really know what he's talking about this, but I thought I'd present it and have some fun with it. So I call this X infinity cricket. You'll see why in a minute. X is a variable; it could be any number, and infinity is just that infinity. So to begin with, I want to talk about the object of the game. Now, in limited overs cricket, the object is simply to score more runs than your opponent. In first class cricket, the object is to both score more runs than your opponent and bowl your opponent out. And that's an important distinction here. And I'll talk a little bit about my thoughts on why I'm thinking this way, but in this case, in X Infinity cricket, it's important to note the object of the game is to both score more runs and more wickets than your opponent. So just one or the other isn't enough. You have to have both more runs and more wickets than your opponent in order to win. So an interesting thing is that part of how I'm thinking about this is that a wicket is a kind of a point. It's part of your score. The inspiration to that came when I saw results of matches where they say this team won by so many wickets. At first I was like, what does that even mean? Because the score is in runs. How could you win by wickets when the score is in runs? But you pay attention to it and you see how it works. So here I decided to just straight up make the wickets be a different kind of points. So we have two different kinds of points here, wickets and runs. And in order to win the game, you have to be ahead on both of them. All right, so that's the important thing. Equal isn't good enough, and just runs or wickets isn't good enough. You have to have more runs and more wickets in order to win the game. So how does that work? Well, we're going to jump right on into the first regular innings. All right, so the first regular innings consists of X overs. X is that number that I said, and that could be picked to kind of influence how long is this going to take. You might pick 20, and maybe the game would play something like 20-20 cricket. I don't know. You could do less. You could probably do more. I think less is probably what you'd aim for. I wouldn't do any fewer than 5. Probably should do multiples of 5 because of the way some of these rules work. So you probably want to pick 5, 10, 15, or 20, something like that. All right. The full number of overs has to be played. So unlike all other forms of cricket, taking 10 wickets doesn't end the innings. Okay, so we're gonna play the full X overs, whatever X is. A bowler can't bowl more than X over 5 overs and may not bowl 2 overs in a row. So that's the standard rules for limited overs cricket. We're gonna keep that. I've got batter restrictions as well, though. This is new, and I'll talk a little bit about why I like that too. But if a batter has been batting for X over 2.5 overs, which if X is 20, that would be 8. Regardless of whether they're on strike or off strike. So I'm just saying if they're in the game as one of the two batters, right, then they have to stop their batting and bring in a teammate in their place at that point. All right. So it doesn't count as the bowling team taking a wicket. That's important to note. So if you bat your X over 2.5 overs and then you go and sit down, they didn't get a wicket from you. And that's the way we count it. All right. You may stop sooner if you wish. Okay, that's fine. You're just not feeling it today or whatever. You can go ahead and stop after one or 2 overs or whatever it is. All right. Just to make sure that we're not switching all the batters at the same time, I have this bullet point here. If no wicket is taken in the first X over 5 overs, then one batter has to stop. So if X equals 20, that would mean that after 4 overs, one of the batters has to swap out if there's been no wicket. And after that, the limit is 8 overs per batter. All right. And then I have, after all batters have batted, if there are any overs remaining, then minimally out batters may bat a second time. All right, and I'll explain what minimally out means in just a second. But there is the possibility of batting a second time, but basically you have to bat through your whole team first. So a little bit of terminology. A minimally out batter is a batter whose number of outs for the game is less than or equal to all of the other remaining teammates other than an active player who's out on the field right now. So if all batters have been out once, then they're all minimally out. If some have been out twice and some have been out once, then the ones that have been out once are minimally out. If some are out 0 and some are out once, then the ones that are out 0 are minimally out. If you stop or you complete that, that's not an out, so that's important, right? So if you bat your full 8 overs, then you're not out, and so you still may be minimally out because of that. I'm going to talk about regular innings in a little bit, but basically the normal innings are regular innings. So that's how the first regular innings goes. We play X overs. There's limits to how much bowling the bowlers can do. There's limits to how much batting the batters can do. We record both the wickets and the runs that are scored during this, and we play the full X overs regardless of how many wickets. So you could theoretically take 15 or 20 wickets during the X overs, and that's fine. You just keep going through all the batters over and over again as much as you need to. All right, the second regular innings. Now the teams switch roles, which is very normal in cricket, right? So the team that was batting is now fielding or bowling, and the team that was bowling is now batting. Now, here's what makes this format of cricket different from limited overs cricket or anything else that I've seen. There's no limit to the number of overs in the second innings. Okay, in the first innings there was a limit of X overs. In the second innings there is no limit. Right? This innings goes on until one of the following happens. If one team has more wickets and more runs than their opponent, then the game is over and that team wins. And so if you think about it, the team that was bowling in the first innings would have scored some number of wickets. Now they're batting, so they're starting to score runs. So if they can score more runs than their opponent had scored before the opponent scores more wickets than they had scored, then they would win. Or alternatively, if the bowling team can take more wickets than their opponent had taken before they score more runs than they scored, then they would win. All right. There is the second point here. If the number of wickets for the teams are equal and the batting team has equal or more runs, then the game is a draw, or we could go to extra innings, depending on how we want to play that. Okay, so that's important. If both teams have taken 5 wickets, and then the batting team pulls the runs even or passes, then that game will be a draw, or we would go to extra innings. The limits for bowling and batting are the same as they were in the first innings. However, after X overs are complete, because there's no limit to the number of overs, you might play more overs in the second innings than in the first. At that point, all players are given one additional allotment of bowling and batting overs. So if you've bowled your limit, but now we've played the full X overs, well, you've got another allotment for bowling more if you'd like. And then the same thing for batting. And minimally out batters may re-enter the game when a batter is needed after X overs are complete. So that's just the way that it would work. So if you remember in the first innings, the batters can re-enter after, for a second time after all of the batters have batted. All right. So that's the basic idea of the whole game. I've got a little bit of how extra innings could work if we wanted to have extra innings. Basically, you just set X equals 1. So we're going to play just the 1 over and then switch. And we're going to alternate which team bats first and which team bats second. And we're going to keep a total number of runs and wickets for the whole game, and basically just keep playing some extra innings until somebody meets the winning criteria. So I like this idea. I have no idea if it would be any good or any fun, but here are my thoughts about why I thought of this. So in limited overs cricket, I feel like wickets are too weak. And I look at the fans and they all cheer for them, and it's a big deal when a wicket is taken. But the truth is that in limited overs cricket, every ball is moving you towards the end of that innings and towards the end of that batting team's chance to score. It doesn't matter if you take a wicket or not. It's just every ball. The only way it matters is if you take all 10 wickets, which does happen sometimes. And in fact, oftentimes it happens as the overs are just about exhausted anyways, because the batters get more aggressive, which I think is part of the appeal of it. But I kind of, the other thing, of course, is that you can possibly get one of their really good batters out and make them bat with a weaker batter by getting a wicket. So that, I'm not saying it's worth nothing, but I feel like it's too weak, because so often you just get through the innings by just bowling the full number of overs. And if you take wickets while you're doing that, great. And if not, oh well, as long as you're bowling through the overs and trying to keep the number of runs down, then that's fine. So I kind of wanted to bring back up the idea of wickets being important, the way that they are in first-class cricket. In first-class cricket, if you don't take the wickets, you're not going to get this game done, and you're not going to win, right? Because remember, in first-class cricket, the idea is you have to score more runs and bowl the other team out. All right. Um, and then the other thought I had was about why I put limited limits on how long the batters can bat for. I feel like in limited overs cricket, you have these situations where just a few of the batters might bat for a large chunk of the game, and in fact, there's no limit to it. You could have the same two batters bat the entire game if they can avoid being out. I mean, I guess that's good, but it just feels like less of a team sport to me in that case. So I thought that we should have some limits, just like we have for the bowlers, right? We didn't decide to say, oh, two bowlers can just bowl the whole game. We decided to have some limits on that to make it, make sure that more of the team is participating in that. And I did it the same way with batters. And in fact, the limit that I came up with is based on the same idea, right? So if a batter's been batting for X over 2.5 overs, so that would be 2/5 of the game. And on average, they would actually be the on-strike batter for half of that time, which is 1/5. So the idea is that we want to have 5 strong batters get into this game, right? You might get more, but typically I think a team is going to have like 5 strong batters and 5 strong bowlers. And it's funny, we don't have any rules that force the batters to bowl occasionally, but we do have rules that force the bowlers to bat occasionally. But anyways, I think this would be fun. Um, the thing that really appeals to me about this format that I think could be extended to other types of games as well is the concept of having 2 different types of points, right? You can score wickets and you can score runs. And they're 2 totally different kinds of points. You can't really say that some number of wickets is equal to some number of runs. They're very different. You get a few wickets and a whole lot of runs in cricket. You get hundreds and hundreds of runs and just a handful of wickets in a typical cricket match. And so I really kind of like this idea of games that involve 2 different kinds of points. I think that's a lot of fun. I do think that I think you could easily devise something like a version of wiffle ball or something based on this same kind of idea if you wanted to, and maybe even just completely other sorts of games as well, where you have just 2 different kinds of points. So, anyways, that's all I had to say. I like to think of games and weird ways to do things and whatnot. And with cricket, when they decided that 5 days of test match cricket is too much and they want to shorten it down to just 1 day, the idea of doing it by limiting the number of overs seems an odd choice to me. And I understand it's become very popular that way, but it just completely changes the game. They didn't decide to just reduce the number of wickets or outs or anything like that. But it creates this situation where you can get through your bowling just by bowling balls, and it doesn't matter if you actually take wickets or not. So, anyways, again, I'm no cricket expert. I'm an American. You can tell that by me talking. The fact that I even know what cricket is or anything about it is a miracle for somebody in my country. And so, I certainly don't have any credibility. If you're a cricket fan out there, I'm happy to hear your thoughts and everything, and certainly understand. Yeah, I get it. I'm no expert on this game at all. It just got me thinking a little bit about some thoughts that I figured I would just put out there for the world to see. So, anyways, let me know what you all think. Happy to hear from you, and thanks a lot. Bye.